Welcome back, listeners. It's Adrian here from Arcade Attack, and we've got another great guest on today's show. We've got Joe Tresca. As you know, Joe, we're huge Mortal Kombat fans. We've had John Tobias in the past. We've covered a lot of the games, and we've got a really interesting few things to talk about today. So, Joe, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me. This is super exciting. I can't wait to get into it.
Oh, me too. Well, we're going to talk about a project you're working on. People can see the description already, but it's an exciting project which I really hope really does go to fruition. But before we talk about Mortal Kombat Trilogy, the remake you're working on, but are you happy to sort of fill in our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and your sort of history in gaming and maybe what you've done in the past and kind of where you've got to now? Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Joe Tresca. I'm the CEO of iBallistic Studio, game studio. What makes iBallistic really unique is that we're a game studio founded on the passion of Mortal Kombat fans. So I want to say I'll take you way back to when the company was really, I think, truly formed back in 2011. I worked in advertising for a number of years. At this point, over 20 years, but at the time it was like 17 or so. And I was working at a particular ad agency, and I was doing cosmetic work for. I had started out my career sort of doing cosmetics work for Estee Lauder. I worked for Aaron Lauder directly. And there was this one particular ad agency that was pitching for work at Avon. And so Avon's a huge cosmetics company. And so they threw a bunch of money at me, and it was kind of my dream job. I was like, okay, this is great. And it was and also a promotion for me, because in the way it works in advertising, you have sort of like executive creative director is like the top of the ladder, and I was a associate creative director, so it would go like associate creative director, and then group creative director, and then eventually executive creative director if you were going to climb that ladder. And so I was really happy to have the opportunity to have a team of people that were going to report to me. And they, like I said, they threw a bunch of money at me. Remember, my wife and I we celebrated. We went to Vegas and celebrated. This was like such a big deal.
Nice.
And within 30 days of me being there, I had this meeting that with Avon that I had to prepare for. So it was a really big meeting. I remember practicing in the bathroom mirror a bunch of times to make sure I didn't mess it up, because at this time, I was the guy behind the guy when it came to presenting and doing these kinds of pitch meetings. I was there presenting facts, presenting graphs, presenting reasons why somebody should take our agency versus another agency. But I was never the guy who was actually running those meetings. So this was really exciting, and I just didn't want to mess it up. And so we get to the day of the actual meeting, and I go through the entire thing. I'm talking to the Avon executives, presenting our idea, and they love it. They rousing applause. I'm like, I've got these guys in the palm of my hands. We got this. And it felt like a little while before they came out and they kind of gave me their decision, because they wanted to talk it amongst themselves, which is pretty normal stuff. And then they came out and they said, Joe, congratulations on an incredible pitch. But unfortunately, after hearing it, we've decided to go with another agency.
No.
So, all right. So that's, it takes the air out of the room a little bit. I said, all right, we'll get them next time. No big deal. You're going to lose a lot more pitches than you're going to win in advertising for sure. And so I got a phone call almost immediately. One of the guys on my team must have called and kind of let the big boss know, my boss, Frank, who's the executive creative director. And he basically said, come on over back to the studio and let's talk about it. So I head back over there, and the first thing he says is, hey, Joe, follow me into my office and shut the door. And within 30 days of what I thought was my dream job, I was fired. So
no,
yeah. So this made me rethink sort of everything that I wanted in life, right? What do I want to be a part of advertising where you lose your job so frequently? Even if you do really well, you're only as good as your last client that you've pulled in, or the last job that you've worked. So I pretty much decided then and there that I probably wasn't going to ever work in advertising again. And so just as backstory, my wife was pregnant with my son Justin, who's 9 years old now. And my we had just bought a house. So I was like, I had no house to pay the mortgage. It was like, there's never a good time to lose your job, but this was,
terrible.
And so I think for some people, they go to the theater, they read books, whatever. That's their way to escape sort of their reality.
Well, yeah.
Well, and for me, it's just games. And I've been a Mortal Kombat fan since I guess when it came out. I was, and I can get into what Mortal Kombat means to me, but at this point in time, the way the company was formed was basically, I happened to be that on the train ride home after having been fired, that I saw that they also were canceling the HD Mortal Kombat collection or whatever it was called. That was supposed to be, they actually had some screenshots of the game that were out there. I mean, I think they started it in 2010, but it was by 2011 where they officially canceled it, and it happened to be on this day that they canceled it. So I just couldn't hear any more bad news. And I was like, on my phone, like Googling Mortal Kombat HD, whatever. And I somehow stumbled because I didn't want to believe it. I was like, I can't believe that this is happening on this day. So I remember stumbling upon a place called trmk.org, the realm of Mortal Kombat. And there were a bunch of Mortal Kombat fans who had heard the news, same as me. And they started this thread about Mortal Kombat HD Remix. And, I had worked in advertising, so I've done things like commercials, and I understand sort of what it takes to put a production together. Not necessarily movies. I've never done anything with movies, but a lot of commercials. So I know that there's a lot of expense involved in that. You've got to get actors. You've got to get, costume, wardrobe, they call it wardrobe. You've got to have craft services. That's the food to feed people for the 14 hours that they're going to be there. You have to have a director of photography. You have to have somebody that handles there has to be a director, somebody who's telling the actors what to do, how to act, and where to go. And so these guys are all saying like, oh, I know somebody who looks like Johnny Cage and we could do this ourselves. And basically what they were saying was, if they're not going to do it, we should do it ourselves as fans. Why is it that that Street Fighter in 2008 got their HD remix? And, here we are, 3 years later, and we are left without any kind of a HD version of this game that we all love so much. And that was when I saw Gabe Melendez's work. He goes by the tag Bleed, and he had been working on this amazing model of 3D model, fully 3D, not a real person. But when I tell you, when he showed this animation of Scorpion from UMK3, just in like the pose, like that we all know. I would say that if the internet could gasp at the same time, it did. You know what I mean? It was so good that people were like, "How did you do that? Yeah. Like, how did you get somebody that looks like the actor and like get him in? Like, it looked that good. It looked, Now of course by today's standards, you see that graphics, you can tell it's 3D. And we could do way better. And some of the stuff that you've seen, if you've been following the HD stuff that we're doing, is really that old. It's like over a decade old. So it's just because we haven't been able to put time into revamping the characters. Right. But today we could make it, again, photorealistic, where nobody would be able to tell that wasn't real actors. But back then, this was so mind blowing, and I knew right then and there that if it was just Gabe and I, we could do it, because I have a background in art. I'm a classically trained artist. So I went to school. It just, it's no big deal. It just means that I went to school to draw, paint, sculpt, and be a true artiste, right? And I quickly sold my soul to advertising. So that tells you how far that career went. But, because you can't make money, as it turns out, unless you're dead. And then of course you don't really need the money at that point. So I decided that I was going to get into advertising very early on because I wanted to utilize those skills. And one of the things that I got really heavy into was 3D art. I was really into like Pixar movies and all the things you could do with 3D. I thought it was really cool. I was not at the level of being able to do characters or like really organic shapes at that time, but I felt pretty good about lighting and being able to reproduce the environments for Mortal Kombat. I knew that we wouldn't have to like film real objects like they did in the original Mortal Kombat, we could reproduce those in 3D and they'd probably be photorealistic. So I knew between Gabe doing the characters and myself doing just the background art, really all we would need is somebody to do music and somebody to put it all together, a programmer. And so that other guys from the community kind of stepped up. And, you know, it's just an amazing, Mortal Kombat fans are really incredible. In general, the amount of talent that they have. And, you know, we had a guy, Justin Slaughter, he's on the team now at iBallistic. And at one point he's like, hey, I'd love to do the soundtrack on this. I've been playing around remixing the sounds and everything. And he has an entire Pro Tools studio at home. And he does, as it turns out, he does indie indie movie soundtracks. So, you know, probably nothing that we've necessarily know, but he handles indie movies. And so he did some tracks that he did from, I think the first one that I heard was Goro's Lair. And in this one part of Goro's Lair, there's this guitar like solo part. And I remember saying to him, I said, like, where'd you get the guitar, man? That's like so cool. Like, did you mix that in? Is that like electronic? He's like, no, man, I play. And like, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me with this guy? Like, this guy, how did we get this talent? You know what I mean? Like, how did we manage that? And you know, and that was just the beginning. People were coming out from everywhere saying like, how can I help? How can I help? I want to be a part of this. And at one point, Tobias actually acknowledged us on Twitter. He was one of the first ones to like publicly acknowledge it, which was both a good and a bad thing because about a year in, we had produced something in Mugen, which is sort of like a fighting game engine that's not quite pro, but it allows you to quickly put things together. Lots of Mugen versions of Mortal Kombat are out there if you know your listeners are interested. But we it turned out Gabe knew that, and then there was another Mugen guy named Interloco. Who, you know, that was his screen name. And he did some amazing work. Like, he was really into it. He had actually reverse engineered somehow the original Mortal Kombat, and he knew where all the hitboxes and hurt boxes were. So we had sort of this inside knowledge that as a team, nobody else really had. So we ended up putting together a pretty decent version of it, and with the help of Justin Slaughter for the music and Gabe doing all the animations. We had like Scorpion, I think it was Scorpion and Sub-Zero fighting against each other. And I remember Gabe calls me. We were at that point, we were video chatting and stuff like that. And he messaged me. I think he might have messaged me, and he was like, "I'm out." And I'm like, "What do you mean you're out? Like, what's going on?" He's like, "I just got a phone call from the head of Warner Brothers legal department, not like some subsidiary, the head." And she was like, "Hi, Gabe. I got your number. I hope you don't mind me calling you. I don't want to scare you, but you know, I represent Warner Brothers, and we're the copyright holder of Mortal Kombat. I just want you to know that you can't make a game. So again, I love your work, and I'm a big fan." And he was like, it was almost worse that she was so nice about it. Gabe always makes me tell it that way, because when I used to tell the story, I used to be like, "Oh yeah, like Big Bad at WB came in and they kind of shut the door on it. They threatened us." But she was super nice. He wants me to make sure everybody knows that.
Killed with kindness.
Yeah, exactly. And he was telling me, it was almost worse because she was so nice, because that's when they end you, right? Like, that's when they end your life.
It's hard to argue back, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I was like, oh man, like, that's crazy. And so he was like, "I'm completely out. I cannot be sued. And, you know, it's just not worth it for me." And so it set the project back considerably. So this is around 2012 now at this point, end of 2012. And it really just kind of pissed me off, if we're being honest. So I knew that we had at the very least, we got their attention. And I knew, since Tobias had seen it and thought it was cool and reposted it on Twitter, that it had caught his attention. And I was like, we're making real traction here. We can't give up. And that's when I got the idea. I had iBallistic as a company that did for freelance work and stuff like that, mostly in advertising. You know, if I came across a freelance client, it was established in 2005. But at this point, I was like, no, iBallistic's a game studio. Right from this point on, this is what we're going to do is we're going to make it so they can't think of us as fans. They're going to think of us as partners. We're going to actually have a game studio, and we're going to actually go through the right channels, which of course I knew nothing about at this point. I knew nothing about it, and the only thing I had was my cousin Danny works in the film industry, and he had worked on a few Warner Brothers films, and so he was like, no man, you've got you cannot give up. He was like really compelling me to push forward on it, because he was like, I can't tell you how many times like people say, no, you can't make this film. And like the director's like, fuck you. And then they get everybody together and they do it. And it becomes this massive thing. And so, he's like, you got it. You cannot give up on this. He's like, you got their attention. You got to keep going. So, shout out to my cousin, Danny Tresca, for helping me out with that. Giving me the right at the right time. He sort of gave me the support I needed to realize that this is what I should do. And so, I ended up getting into that's really how the company started.
Wow.
And then we ended up pitching the project. And so in 2015, we had a working version of it, and I went to E3. And so that's a funny story about E3 is like, you can't get in unless you're an industry insider. And I, of course, was not. So I can say this now, but I completely falsified like all the documents that you needed to get into E3 at all. So I'm there like on the lam, like I'm not even supposed to be there. I know I'm not. I walk up to the representative of Warner Brothers, and now given what we know that they already like sort of semi-threatened us and said that we can't do stuff. I walk over to the rep there. And this poor girl, she must have felt like, oh, why me, right? Because I walk up to her and I'm like, hey, I've got in this laptop a version of Mortal Kombat in HD. Do you want to see it? And I'm kind of whispering it. And she's like, why are you whispering? And I'm like, well, no, I just, I just don't know how these things are done. Like, is there a way that we can meet up and I can kind of show it to you? And she's like, let's meet up. We made a date and a time. It wasn't going to be that day because it was the end of the show. So it was like the next day of the show. And she completely stands me up. Does not show up. She took off. Maybe she like called security. I don't know what happened, but she did not show up at all. And I ended up going home without anything to show for it. I had no connection. It didn't end up working. So I was like, all right, back to the drawing board. We're going to try to attract more talent to the game and like finish it out, because at that time it was playable, but there wasn't a lot of sound effects. It wasn't like as good as it could have been, right? And so right around this time I go back to Gabe and I'm like, Gabe, I know it's been like a few years since we talked, but I would love to have you back on this. And he's like, well, wait a second, I'm not messing with this. And I'm like, look, we're a legitimate company now, so if anybody's going to get sued, it's going to be me. You and I will sign a contract that says I take all of the legal brunt of anything that happens. You got to trust me here, man. And so he was like, you know what? Let's do it. So he got back involved, and that really pushed everything forward. Nice. And it was like summer 2016 where I ended up sending, I guess that would be like the next E3 2016. And now because I was in the last E3, I didn't have to prove my credentials to be in the next one, which is great. So I was able to just tell them, hey, I'm going to come to E3 this year. And because of that, it gave me access to this thing called Connected E3 or E3 Connect. I can't remember what it's called, but it allows you to, it's like a sort of like a mailing service just to be able to connect to other companies. And one of those companies was Warner Brothers. Nice. So I messaged them through the Connected E3 platform. And to my surprise, it was like 2 days later, I was like, hey, I have a version of Mortal Kombat in HD. Is this something you guys would be interested in hearing more about? And Mick Pack, I always have to point this guy out. Awesome. He still works there at NetherRealm Studios. He's there. He is there, I guess, head of mobile, or like back then he was just like, he was a little bit lower down, but he's been promoted. So now I think he handles anything Mortal Kombat mobile at this point. And he was like, Joe, this is so cool. Like, because I had sent a bunch of screenshots to the platform, and he's like, I'm not going to be at E3 this year. Nobody is for Warner Brothers. So you don't, have to try to meet us there. But my boss, Sean, wants to talk to you. And I'm like, Sean who? Like, who's it? I'm like, wait a second. Sean Hemmerich like the head of NetherRealm Studios, Sean Hemmerich. And so I'm like, holy shit, this is crazy. So now that they have me talking to, like, all of a sudden now I get this email from Warner Brothers, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this going to be? And it's like, hey, I'm head of Warner Brothers licensing department. It looks like one of our executives would like to speak with you. And like we go through this whole background check thing, and like they want to make sure that like I'm not a fraud and that I appear to be who I am. We go through this whole background check. That took like 3 weeks, and then finally it's like, okay, sign these documents. You have to sign like several NDA kinds of things. Which I'm totally breaking now, but of course it's years later, and those are have dissolved. But they basically, they don't last too long, 2 years at most. And so he, Sean's like, hey man, I'm so glad that we're getting to actually talk. This stuff looks really great, and I fully support what you guys are doing. Let me know where you are. And he's like, and of course we're gonna want Ed to look at this. And I'm like, so Ed, who? Ed Boon? And he's like, yeah, of course Ed Boon. And so I'm just like losing my shit at this point because Ed Boon to me was, and I've said this to him like on multiple occasions that I've talked to him, but he's my George Lucas. He's my, Steven Spielberg. He's that guy. And I've been following him even when I was like 14 years old when the game first came out. I had EGM magazine, and I remember like young Ed Boon and young John Tobias being there and talking about like the process of how they film these characters and then bring them to life. And I just was like, I guess like 14-year-old me would never in a million years think that I'd be talking to Ed,
that is cool.
Right? Like that was just mind blowing to me. And he was amazing. Ed was super cool about everything. He's a programmer. He programmed the original Mortal Kombat, I think 1, 2, and all the way up to 3. And he was very pragmatic, like you'd expect. He asked really, really pointed questions that were intelligent. You could understand exactly the reason why he was asking. And he basically was like, you answered all the questions really well. And as far as I'm concerned, I totally support you. And then he said stuff like the kind of stuff that you never forget. Like, if we're gonna do this, it has to be Joe and his team because they understand Mortal Kombat. They get it. I almost wouldn't trust anybody else. And like stuff like that is just like, it sticks with you forever, right? Because it's like one of your
massive compliment.
Oh, it's massive coming from Ed, and I have just so much respect for him. So he another thing he said, which I thought was very interesting, was that he said, if we do this, we have to make sure that Joe doesn't lose his shirt in the process. And I was like, what? That's ominous. Like, what does that mean? And he knew that I was going to get chewed up and spit out. He knew it. He knew back then that it was going to be tons of like it ended up being 2 years of pitching to every division of every, like Warner Brothers financial division, and then their marketing division. And then, it felt like every few weeks there was a new pitch scheduled with a new executive that I needed to start all over and explain to them why this was good for their division. And I was assigned a producer, and now I'm kind of going in because this was a 2-year period. The first time in 2016, they basically said, sorry, Joe, it's going to be too expensive. We don't believe 100,000 people will buy this game. And I said, I have to say that whoever does your marketing, statistics needs to be fired. I've worked in this industry for a really long time in this department, statistics, and I can tell you 100% that is way off. And they were like, and I remember Sean saying to me, Joe, he's like, look, we have an entire department dedicated to this. These guys know. They have the data. And so it's like, you can't argue with that. Like, he's like, I want you to know this isn't like something we casually, flippantly sort of came across. Like, we have the data from how the past games have done, and we apply that data model to how the new games would potentially do. And I was like, Sean, I'm just agree to disagree, man. Like, it's just not going to, there's no way. This game is a million seller minimal. It's going to probably sell way more than that because it's not the old games rehashed. It's new. It has that fresh coat of paint that everybody's been looking for. Yeah. And we have the opportunity to fix things that the old game had broken. I remember talking to Ed, and he said, there's about 10 bugs that we would want to fix in the game. And I can't remember all of them because a lot of times people ask me which ones those are, but there are things that he wanted to fix that, that very few people know about. And that it is just always bugged him. Like, if we're gonna do this, we got to fix these
proper.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's get this right. And so another thing he told me is, so at the time when we were doing this, we were reverse engineering Mortal Kombat by taking video of every single move to see what the jump height of Scorpion is, what the jump height of Liu Kang is, and then same thing with like fireballs and projectiles. How far do they travel? How fast do they travel? And what we were doing is putting our HD sprites on top of that to match up the gameplay. And that's what really impressed Ed the most, because we did all that without having, like, we did it the hard way. And he tells me, of course, which I thought was really funny. He's like, of course, you know, if we do this, we're just going to give you the source code. And I was like, thank you, Jesus. You know, I was like, that is amazing. Yes, that's what we need. And so, yeah, he was just so great to work with. And we went through this entire process, and it got to the point where the first time around, they said no. And then Sean said to me, look, it's not the end of the line for this. We're going to be promoting our next Mortal Kombat game, which would have ended up being Mortal Kombat 11. And let's talk about how, like, this next summer, and see where we're at. Maybe the market's changed. Maybe things have shifted. Maybe, you know, we can use this as a promotional tool or a pre-order of some kind to help benefit the release of MK11. And I said, that was all I needed. I was like, thank you, Sean. Let's talk again next summer. And that's how I got to work. I found my programmer, my lead programmer. I found my secondary programmer. And those guys have been with me since that point. And that was, you know, that would have been like 2017. And then we made another pitch. This time we rebuilt the entire game using the same kind of technique, where we would film the game from MAME and then put our HD sprites on top of that, and then have it match up as closely as possible as we could. And we ended up building the game in Unity that second time. And it went great, because that was one of the things that Sean had said to me, like midway through summer in 2016. He said, what I really need to sell this is 2 fighters on screen and the game feels right. And so I said, you know, at the start of summer this time, I said, hey, I'm back, Sean. And this time I've got a playable version of the game that, you know, is really like, you know, the other version was playable in Mugen, but that's not really the same as an engine that could actually be used to make the game, like Unity. And so Sean was like, this is awesome, Joe. Like, thanks for doing all this. I'm going to get together Ed, and he's going to want to play test it. And so that day came, and I redid the pitch again. And this time it was called Mortal Kombat Returns. And you can actually find it on the internet. I can't tell you where it is, but you can find it floating around somewhere if you want to play it.
Right.
And yeah, it was amazing, because Ed is actually playing the game, and he's like, yeah, this feels really good. I love the way this feels. One of the funny things too was at the time I didn't know. I mean, and maybe this makes me a poor Mortal Kombat fan, but I did not know that Ed did the actual announcer's voice in MK1. I always thought it was Tobias for some reason. And we found a voice actor to like sort of mimic that voice. And some people think it's spot on, other people think it sounds off, but we recorded that, and that was part of the game that they played. Nice. And he was like, who do you have doing the voice? And I was like, I'm like, that's, you know, a voice actor that was a friend of a friend. And to be honest, I could not remember the guy's name. Like, I was like kind of nervous, I guess you might say.
Yeah.
And so I didn't do that poor guy justice, but I was like, why do you think it sounds good? And he was like, it's pretty good. Yeah. He's like, you know, I did the original voice, so I'd probably just do it again. And I was like, it's just like, you know, I'm dreaming about like Ed being in the vocal booth again, like doing this whole thing and us working together, like singing Kumbaya around the fire. And I just, you know, to me, this is amazing. Like, this is my dream come true. And he was like, yeah, this looks really great. And, you know, I kind of skipped through this, but in 2016, one of the things that they allowed me to do was to find, because we didn't have a real programmer, we were using Mugen, as they said, Ed said, you need to get development support. And so he said, I want you to go out and find some game studios and get pricing for how much it would cost for them to program it. You guys can do the art, but you're going to need help to do the programming. So I did that. And, you know, I got this experience of sort of like, you know, being this almost like a representative of Warner Brothers. So I remember telling a bunch of these studios and many of these studio heads I'm still friends with today, which was just an amazing experience to be on the other side of it, like to see how a pitch goes. Like, how do you pitch me now if I'm Warner Brothers? Like, how does a pitch come together? Like, you go by man months, and how many man months does it take to build, each of the sections, and you have to break it up into milestones. And so after seeing 10 of these, it was such a learning experience that you just can't learn. Like, you could go to school and never learn any of this stuff, but like being in it, it was the most valuable industry experience I could ever possibly have. And of course, it was fun being that guy that was basically like, I felt like I was like, I have massive balls, big cock, here I am, and I'm like, yeah, so I'm representing Warner Brothers, and we want to make a fighting game, but we can't tell you what it is. And everybody kind of knew, right? Because that's all I had to say. And they were just like, what else can we do for you? Well, we could do this, this, and this. And they're kind of like fighting over this. And so we ended up going with a particular studio that I can't really mention, but they basically were like, they had the best price and they had the best tech. And I was like, this is the studio I want to go with. They seemed really cool to work with. And that was when they did like the P&L, they did their profit and loss. And that's when they said like 100,000 people won't buy this. And I completely disagreed. So that's when that in 2017, the year following, I was like, I'm going to bring my own development team and we're going to get the cost way down, because now we're going to keep it all in house. And we did. The cost was north of 3.4 million. It would have been, or 3.2 million or something like that. And I was able to promote it for under $1 million at this point. So like almost no risk to these guys. I ended up having conversations with them, and we started out, like I said, I had a producer assigned to me, and I remember we got after pitch of all the different sections of Warner Brothers, after Ed said, all right, I'm going to support you. And we're going to send this project off to Warner Brothers so that they can decide. They assigned me a producer, and he was great. He was just like, look, here's what you have to know. Like, this person that you're about to pitch, like, they're the head of marketing. So they don't give a shit about like gameplay or any of that shit. They want to know how much they can sell. And like, you're about to talk to the finance officer, like the chief, one of the head finance people at Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment. You need to make sure that you have every question that he has about cost of acquisition to a new customer, like all of these things have to be figured out. What I anticipate the marketing cost to be, because what he's doing is he's testing you to see if you know what you're talking about. If at any point in time he gets the feeling that you don't know what you're talking about, deal's over. He's like, I'm just trying to help you out because this is what you're going to be facing. I'm like, holy shit. But we did it. Every single one that we went through. I remember at the end of the year, he basically was like, Joe, we get 1,000 pitches at Warner Brothers every year. Yours is in the top 5. Whoa. So you have to understand, like, if that's all you ever get to, that is insane. Like, especially like the background of your studio. Like, we have pro studios that have been making games for years, and you're being considered amongst that group. And so January, it was like mid-January, after not having heard anything like all through December, they basically said, so January 2018 now, I get a call, and the Warner Brothers executive says, congratulations, your project's getting the green light. I'm not ashamed to say that when I got off the phone, I like put my hands in the air, slid down the wall, and there were actual tears. I am an emotional guy, but it takes a lot to make me cry. Tears of joy. And I was elated. I don't know what other word I could. This was my dream come true. And they were like, we're going to connect you with another game studio that's going to help like guide the process, because you're going to need help getting it on like Xbox and PlayStation. And, you guys are going to need help with that.
Yeah.
And so I remember telling the guys, and they were like, oh my God, we did it. Because everybody was working for free. Everybody was doing like for years at this point, was just doing it for free. Just all for the chance to be able to pull this off. And it had to be maybe if it were a week later, I get a phone call, same executive. Sorry, Joe, we've decided to go in a different direction, and we're going to keep the project going, but it's not going to be with your team. It's too important of a project to us as a company to give it to a development group with such little experience. So they pretty much said it right there what the reason was. I sensed
Just
that
1
there
week
was
after. I mean,
yes, 1 week later,
oh,
and that's how a friend of mine who works in Hollywood, on the actually in LA, he's a writer, and he was saying you got Hollywooded, man. Like something happened. He's like, I'm telling you right now, something happened where like a friend needed help, and they were like, oh fuck these guys, we don't, like let's help our friend, and that's sure enough. That is, I think that's what actually happened, because this is no, like I want to say this because I don't know anything. I don't know them. Blind Squirrel was the team that they ended up giving it to, and I do not have any animosity for them whatsoever. Good for them. But I do know that they were going through layoffs, and I do know that some of the executives were really close with the head of Blind Squirrel Studio. So it would not be an unreasonable. It would not be unreasonable to suggest that maybe a phone call happened and maybe they kind of said, yeah, we're going to go with you guys instead, because we need to keep your studio afloat. Now, of course, Blind Squirrel has survived and they are thriving as far as I know. They're doing really good. But then when the project came to them, unfortunately, it got, and I don't know what the reason is there, but it's very possible. And this is another thing where I speculate, where Ed said to me, if it's going to be done, it's got to be Joe and his team. I have this distinct feeling, and again, maybe this is all in my head, and it's a fairy tale that I tell myself, that Ed literally said, "Oh, you cut Joe and his team. Well, I'm not using your team, so the project's canceled." I don't know that happened. I can't say that it happened.
I know for a fact,
but I think that's what potentially happened, and that's really where I blessed the game studio, because I went back to my guys. I'm like, all right, guys, what do you want to do? We have this great fighting engine that Ed Boon himself basically sanctioned and said, this is great.
Yeah.
It would be a shame for us all to break up. But I can understand if you want to. And it was really only one member of the team that said, guys, I can't do this anymore. I got to move on. Ultimately, it ended up being two members of the team. But we moved onward and upward. And it was only about 6.5, 7 months later that after being told no, where we created our own IP called Lawless, which one day I'm going to get a chance to give to the world. It's awesome. Basically, this one studio exec, I'm going to name him by name because he's awesome. Matt Karsh, who's the studio. He's the head of Saber Interactive. He was the one who, when we had nothing, he basically was like, Joe, I don't even know why I'm doing this, and it's so crazy. But he's like, your passion for when you gave me this presentation, I just want to give you money because I want to support you in any way that I can. And his way of doing that was to sign over $1 million contract with us and really support us. And I couldn't, if Matt happens to come across this, Matt, thank you so much. It didn't work out ultimately. The project ended up getting canceled about 6 months in. Embracer Group purchased Saber Interactive for over $500 million. And then they get to decide what projects Saber is going to do or not do, because they just paid a lot of money for them. And our game did not make the cut. And so I had 2 demos to work with, unfinished games. Lawless being much more complete with 4 different characters, online play fully working, and we developed this new system called Net Blast, which I'd love to tell you about later. But we invented this new AI, machine learning AI algorithm that we call Sado, which acts like a human opponent and actually learns from you. So amazing stuff came out of that, and eventually I ended up pitching another fairly large, well-known publisher in the UK. I cannot say the name of the title of that game, but I've been working on that with the team for about 18 months now. We're still working on it. We still have a few things that we need to tie up with it. But I can say that it's a fun fighting game, more along the lines of Smash Brothers kind of stuff. Not quite a platform fighter. It'll definitely intrigue people that are fans of the Mortal Kombat stuff and the fans of platform fighters. It's going to be really fun when it releases. And then on top of that, there are other projects that I can't talk about, but they are super exciting. We have a potential partnership with Netflix potentially happening, and also well, I'll just say that it's a fighting game that everyone, when they hear about it, is going to lose their mind. Like, even if you're a Mortal Kombat fan, you're going to absolutely lose your when you hear about it. And that just kicked off this week, so super excited about that. And so yeah, this is the way this studio has come to be. And I know it's a really long-winded way. It's like a 30-minute answer to your question, but that's how iBallista came to be.
It's like a roller coaster, Joe. Ups and downs. You could write this into a book, really.
I've been saying it all the time. Like, one day I'm gonna write a book about this. This is some crazy stuff.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. There's still a petition to get Mortal Kombat remade. Is that true?
Yeah. So recently I had been playing with Unreal Engine 5, and since I'm a Mortal Kombat fan and a 3D artist, I was like, you know what? I want to see what this new engine can do. And you can do photorealism. It's unbelievable what Unreal Engine 5 is capable of. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to see what it would be like if I were to make. I think it was the Combat Tomb from Mortal Kombat 2 is the first one that I did. Because I've never seen that stage remade in any of the modern games, and I would love to see that game, that stage come to light. So I decided to start working on that as my first project, and then just on Twitter, I had like no followers on Twitter. So please follow me at Calactite if you at CALACTYTE. I had just been, it's almost like I was born yesterday. Like, I discovered Twitter like this year, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna maybe I'll get some Twitter followers if I post this stuff up on there and get that dopamine rush when people are like, yay, it's cool, or maybe some people are gonna be like, oh, this looks like shit, but people loved it. And one particular guy who goes by the name Minzy online was like, you have to petition. Like, what game are you making? And I was like, I'm not making a game, man. I'm like, I'm just messing around. Like, this is just a fun thing for me to do. Like, when my kids go to bed, like I can like get my me time for a little bit and just like create and do what I like to do. And then, having that time to yourself is just like, it's so important, especially with like all the stuff that we've been through in the past 2 years as a society. Right. But it was like my me time. That was it. There was nothing behind it except I wanted to learn Unreal Engine and see how I could apply it to maybe new games. Cause we were looking at, we've been a Unity studio for a while now, since we basically started. And I wanted to get into what can Unreal Engine do. I feel like it might be a little bit more full featured. And so that's really all it was. And so I put all that stuff out there and people were loving it. And it got like, 1,000 likes or whatever. And in a really short period of time. And Max Dude, who's a big deal, Maximilian online, he has like a really big Twitter following and also huge YouTube following, and with over 1 million subscribers. And so he follows me. We connected really early on, like when he was maybe less popular, but he's always been kind of a big deal. And he just said one thing, and that made it blow up. He was like, "This is the version of Mortal Kombat I want to play." Nice. And it was when I did the Pit 3 version, because I had learned how to sculpt the statue of the gargoyle and stuff on that, if you remember how that stage is. I couldn't believe the amount of support after Max sort of like just said that one thing. It was like instantly, like everybody started following me, and I'm still like a nobody on Twitter, but in terms of the support for this project, I was like, okay, this is the right time. And it was right around October, and it would have been it was October of last year. So that was 25 years since Mortal Kombat Trilogy, the original, had come out. And I said, this is perfect. We'll announce it, bring back Mortal Kombat Trilogy. And then I started reaching out to a bunch of my friends in the journalism industry, I know a bunch of people from various places. And think of a publication, and I probably know somebody there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was like, guys, here's some. This is what we're trying to do. Here's some like promo images. If you have some dead time to fill, it would be awesome if you throw this up there. And I couldn't believe it, but like it was it spread like wildfire. And then at that point, I mean, literally worldwide, from like all the way across to as far as Russia, you were getting
Wow.
people talking about iBallistic and wanting to remake Mortal Kombat, and so it's been like a really wild ride, and I'm super thankful for the support that the Mortal Kombat community has given me worldwide to do this.
And do you know if Ed or even John has seen this new version, or no comment yet from those people?
I have not heard comments from Ed or John. I always say this. The one, like, it's like on my bucket list. I have not had a chance to meet John. I've met Ed now. I've met everybody else. I feel like I even got to talk to Dan Forden, and I mean, I've met pretty much all the originals except for John, and he's an artist, and so like I feel like he's the guy that I would really connect with. But I'm like, and I have a lot of people who are like, I'll give you his number, you can call him up, and I'm like, I don't want to be that weirdo. Like, I want it to be a natural thing. So I never I don't ask people for like, hey, can I get his contact? I could call him up probably on his cell phone.
I get it. Yeah,
but I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? So like, I just want to, I want it to be something that happens naturally if he sees the work. And so that's kind of why I haven't reached out to him. But I do know that NetherRealm Studio has seen it. I became pretty close with Jonathan Anderson over at NRS when we were doing the Mortal Kombat remake stuff, and he's a great guy, and he liked the project, so he's seen it. He threw a like on it. So he's definitely seen it, and if he's seen it, I know that like Sean has seen it, and then there's a possibility that Ed has, but Ed's really busy, so you can't guarantee that either. I have the contact information. That's one of the reasons why, like, a lot of people say, well, why now? Why are you doing this? And it's just at this point, if the reason they said no last time was because we didn't have the experience, it's like, now we make Xbox games. Now we make PlayStation 5 games. Now we have experience with Nintendo Switch. Like, now we can do a multi-platform game because we've done it. And
you proved yourself, haven't you? Yeah.
Now we just want to be able to come to them, and I have all the contacts. I have these guys' cell phone numbers, their email addresses, all of that. And so, I feel like even when they said sorry, it was like all those guys made sure that they linked in with me. It was, they wanted to connect to about future work. So it was sort of like a wink, wink, like, all right, look, we know this didn't work out, but this is not goodbye forever. When you get to the point when you're ready, we'll be here. So that's kind of why I think that, and I can't say for sure if Warner Brothers will do it, but we have a change.org petition that we established, that Minzy helped establish, and that has almost 25,000 people have signed it. And it's a massive amount, and you have to figure these are the most diehard Mortal Kombat fans. They're going to tell everybody they know, and if we can get, I set the goal to be 100,000 because I want to be able to match that number, so they can say, look, it's definitely going to be over 100,000, right? But I think that I'm really waiting, mostly because we're super busy right now, and I can't give the project the full attention that it deserves. It's something we're doing in between. Like I said, like, I'm doing this like at nighttime when my kids go to sleep. I have more people working on it now, doing characters, doing environment design that we've added to the studio, and they're doing this stuff. They're able to do it, but my direct team does not have the current bandwidth because of how much stuff is going on right now. And so I want us to get to 100,000 if we can, or as close as possible, and then I'll reach out. And even then, like I said, there's no guarantees, but hopefully that's enough of a critical mass for them to say, okay, there's something here, and we'll see where it goes from there.
I'll put a link to the petition in the show notes, but it's easy to find, isn't it? It's just how do you bring back Mortal Kombat? Or
Yeah, it's hashtag BBMKT, and so it's Bring Back Mortal Kombat Trilogy. And I think if you look that up on change.org, you should be able to find it.
yeah,
But I'll make sure that I get you a direct link to it so
yeah, I'll
that
get the link and put it below in the notes. But I look, Joe, I find this story really interesting. I hope I think it will happen. Fingers crossed for you. It sounds like it's written in the stars. It's such a battle for you to get this far.
it
You don't
is.
want to
It
you
is.
don't want to throw in the towel now, do you?
No,
Really?
no way, no way.
Um, Look, like you said, y- well, it sounds like it has to happen. I really hope it does. Look,
Same.
let's whiz through a couple like really quick few questions now, just
Yeah,
about why you love Mortal Kombat. We'll keep it short and sharp because
yeah.
the brilliant story. But maybe can you explain to our listeners and viewers why you love Mortal Kombat so much? When was the first time you saw it in the arcades? Let's say, why are you taken aback so much?
Yeah, yeah. So I first time I saw it was when I was 14 years old. Used to go to there was a mall where that had a food shopping place where you could go food shopping, but also it had an arcade and an entire mall. So ironically, the actual arcade at that mall didn't get Mortal Kombat until almost 2 months after it had released.
Right.
But the pizzeria there's this pizzeria called Adrian's Pizza. It's still to this day like the best pizza ever. And they had Mortal Kombat in their pizzeria. It was the only arcade machine they had there. And I remember seeing it. I mean, it was, first of all, I was like, what is this? And I had read about it in EGM magazine maybe a month prior, but I didn't expect to see it like at all for a while. And there it was. And to me at that time, I'm a black belt in Ishinru karate, so I'm very into martial arts. So I'm into martial arts movies, of course. I used to stay up and watch, and I still to this day don't know. I think it was called USA Up All Night. It was like this channel that if you were up after like midnight, which I often was, then you would, especially at 14, like I'm sure my parents loved that, but I'd be up. I was always a night owl, and I couldn't sleep. And so I'd go downstairs, I'd watch TV, and I'd end up watching these like really crazy martial arts movies. So I knew where they were coming from immediately. Badly dubbed martial arts movies at that, but really fun to watch. And that game, when I saw it, to me at 14 was like real people. Like, I don't care what anyone says, like that was at 14, having never seen graphics like that before in my life, it felt like this was, how did they do this? These are real people. And I was not drawn to the blood or the violence or anything like that. I was just like, the mystique was really what drew me in. Like, like I didn't even see a fatality for the first, I feel like it was months before I saw a fatality because no one knew how to do any. And I think one time, I don't know if the AI at times, depending on the difficulty setting it's set on, will do fatalities. But I believe the first one I ever saw was Raiden, where he, reaches up and he does the electrical bolts to your head and explodes. And I remember it was, I mean, you have to realize you're talking about 10 or 12 people. You can't even see the screen around this game. And when that happened, everybody was like, "Oh!" Like, it was just, yeah. The excitement was palpable, And so yeah, that's what drew me into Mortal Kombat. I was a fan ever since, and I became you could say I became obsessed at that point.
Nice. Do you have a favorite character out of all the Mortal Kombat characters?
I do, yeah. So I always played Scorpion, and my biggest claim to fame is Scorpion from MK2. I had 144 wins in a row. So that was I won some kind of local tournament or whatever, and I thought I was king shit for that. But yeah, my favorite actual character though, because I got bored of playing with Scorpion. I know, like when UMK3 came out, I didn't have the same feeling about playing Scorpion as I did in the other games. And so I decided with Mortal Kombat 2, Baraka was my favorite.
Yeah,
and
I'm
so
a big fan.
He's been my favorite, probably my favorite character ever since. Yeah.
He's great, isn't he? I love his, that's just so cool.
Yeah.
I love his claws.
I love it. Yeah.
How do you? I'll be honest with you, Joe. I stopped playing Mortal Kombat probably after the trilogy. To be honest,
Yeah,
I thought it personally. I thought Mortal Kombat 4 kind of lost its way, and I kind of sort of I dipped in and out a little bit, but I haven't really played. I haven't even really played Mortal Kombat 11. I'll be blunt with you. But
yeah.
what's your personal opinion about the latter Mortal Kombat games? Are you a fan, or how do you reflect?
Yeah, I mean, so Mortal Kombat has become, somebody said this to me one time, and it stuck with me. I can't remember who said it, but somebody was like, Mortal Kombat is like a kid playing with their action figures and just like that's what it is basically. Like
Yeah,
those, if especially if you're a child of the 80s, like when action figures were like a big deal. Now kids don't really play with action figures so much
yeah,
anymore, but like that's what Mortal Kombat is. It's like you got the cowboy playing against like the demon, and it's so crazy, and that's why we love it. And so I will always be a fan of sort of the franchise of like what it is. But to your point about from a gameplay perspective, I think it's become much more complicated. And Mortal Kombat 9 was on the right path, but then 10 and 11, I feel like they veered off into the sort of competitive space that is
yeah,
it puts only an elite type of player is going to really stick with it long enough to become consistently good
yeah.
at a game like Mortal Kombat 11 or even 10. So yeah, I think that I 100% agree with you. I played 4 in the arcade because I used to work in an arcade, so
Oh, cool.
I got to play that game a lot and get good at it to where I felt competent with it, but I did not love it nearly as much. They felt like they just kept adding more and more things to it, and it felt a little gimmicky. I love the
Yeah,
speed of MK4, but outside of that, like the way the characters are rendered, all of that felt like a massive step back for me, especially after like the having feeling like these characters were real and then going back to this sort of
mm,
poorly rendered representations of the characters, which was the best they could do back then. Um, I think that they made the right decision ultimately that they had to start going in that direction. And maybe it had to go through what I would call the dark ages of Mortal Kombat
yeah.
before it reached like what I would say the more of the upswing, which is MK9 was like a really, really brought back,
I might
back
have to
Mortal
play that
Kombat.
one. I haven't
Yeah,
played
you should
9, so
definitely
yeah.
check it out because it is a great mix between like MK2 and MK3 UMK3 and sort of the newer stuff. So yeah.
No, good stuff. Um, Whenever I talk about Mortal Kombat, I always in the back of my mind I always think of Street Fighter because it's a massive rivalry. Are you a fan of Street Fighter as well? Or do you hate that game, or what's your
No,
personal
I
opinion?
am a massive fan of Street Fighter. That was sort of my first love in fighting games
Yeah.
in the arcade. And so M Bison was my guy
Oh
when
yeah.
Champion Edition came out. And yeah, I was crazy. I was a Sega fan, and so when Sega got the version of Mortal Kombat that had blood, I was
Oh
gloating
yeah.
to everybody that I would hear me. But on when they eventually got Champion Edition, I think it was Street Fighter, the home edition, I was
So
like the
good.
first one, but I had to get it day one, day release. Love that game, love Street Fighter. I Street Fighter lost me, if we're being honest, when Third Strike came out
Mm.
for Street Fighter 3. I just felt like it was too much of a change in the system. I know some people love it. It's got great animation, but yeah, I Street Fighter lost me for a while there. I got back into Street Fighter 4, and I really haven't gotten into Street Fighter 5. For whatever
Yeah.
reason, it didn't appeal to me.
And Street Fighter 6 is just
I
been
saw
announced, isn't
that.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, that looks interesting.
It does look
Yeah,
interesting. Let's talk quickly about the Mortal Kombat movies, just really briefly, because
yeah,
I've watched most. I haven't seen the most. I'll be honest, I haven't seen the most recent one, but I've seen the first couple.
yeah.
They're not bad, but what do you think personally of the movies? Do you reckon they do the games justice, for example?
Yeah. So I Todd Garner, I think, is the director. I want to first of all say that he is the right guy to direct the movie. His
The latest film, is that right? Or
Yeah, the latest film. And I think they just announced that he's doing MK2, the sequel to the most recent movie.
yeah,
And so I love the way he interacts with the fans. No fan is too small for him. Like if you respond to him and give him some kind of either positive or negative, I've seen him respond to the fans and it blows me away. Like this guy doesn't need to talk to anybody. Most directors wouldn't. But he really listens to the fans. And I love that about him. And that makes me feel pretty confident about what he's going to do with the sequel. I think he's heard a lot of the negative thoughts people have had about Cole Young, which, you know, Cole Young as a character, it's like, why didn't you just make it Johnny Cage? Like that's the everyman that we're looking for. That's his role. It was weird that they did that. And there's some, if you listen to some of the interviews that he does, you have to wonder to what degree Warner Brothers has sort of put their 2 cents into what should and shouldn't be in there. Maybe they felt, you know, through marketing research, whatever, that there needed to be a Cole Young in this situation. I loved Kano. I thought he was amazing. I don't know the actor that plays him, but that was fun to watch. I was a little let down by the fact that it's like a pre-tournament to the tournament. I felt that I thought they did a really nice job with Sub-Zero and all of the especially the dynamic between Sub-Zero and Scorpion was awesome. I love that. I love the fighting. I thought the choreography was really great. Some people don't like it. I thought it was great. And I would say that it was a letdown that Goro, like the way Goro gets into a fight with Cole, and then that entire scene I wish didn't happen because I would have preferred Goro to have a better ending than what happened. So no spoilers there, but I just would have preferred it to be better than that. That kind of took it down a few notches. So for me, I'm going to give it like a 50 out of 100. There's enough meat there that I feel like the next one they could do it right if they listen to what the fans have to say. I like that they try to get in a bunch of different characters, but that's really hard to do. So yeah, I'm hopeful for the future because I think that this is a director that does care about what the fans want. And we know that Johnny Cage is going to be in the next one. And so I think there's an opportunity. Believe there's a new writer on it. Correct me. I might be wrong on that. So there's a lot of opportunity for it to improve.
And you prefer it to the 90s films, I take it, or did you have...
I prefer it to any sequel to the 90s films. I don't even remember how many there were. But yes, the first Mortal Kombat film is still the best one in my opinion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I quite like the first one. It's a bit cheesy here and there, but there is some interesting bits.
Part of the fun.
I haven't seen the latest Mortal Kombat movie, but it's on my to-do list. I definitely want to watch it.
Okay, definitely check it out. Definitely check it out. Yeah.
Favorite fatality across any Mortal Kombat? Have you got a particular favorite one you just love, just blew your mind, or just literally just thought this is the best one ever? Or
so there's 2 now because I've been asked this question before, and my I guess the one that I like the most is just because I've seen it a lot is Baraka from MK2, where he stabs them up and then they kind of slide down. I love that. I think that's really cool. But another one that kind of blew me away was Kung Lao when he takes his hat off and splits you in half. I thought in MK2 again, that was totally unexpected and cool. And then I guess another one that I would put out there was Shang Tsung, where he morphs into Kintaro and like breaks your top half off or whatever. So yeah, definitely that's probably it's those 3. Between those 3, yeah.
I've got it's a tough question actually, but do you have a particular favorite Mortal Kombat game ever? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it the original? Or
it's gonna make some people mad or surprise people, but Mortal Kombat 2 is my hands down favorite because of the fact that I remember playing 1 and being blown away by that, and it felt like 7 months later, if that, maybe it was just when I discovered it, the sequel came out, and it was everything better, like everything that the original game had, plus more characters, more environments, like everything, and just blew me away. Like the music in that game was just, I remember ordering the soundtrack from the arcade. It was like $3 or something plus shipping and handling. And it took like 6 months to come to my house. But like, I listened to that thing like every day for like months, like it was amazing. And so, yeah, it expanded the mystique, all the stuff that I loved about the mystique, be like, oh my gosh, like Scorpion's pulling his mask off and there's a skull behind it. Like, what is this all about? All that stuff. Like, it really, there was a lot of payoff for that game. And so, yeah, that hooked me. That was my favorite.
I'd have to agree if I had to choose. So I think it's absolutely incredible game. I was going to ask you you kind of answered already what projects you're working on. You can't really say too much, but I appreciate you know giving a little bit of details there. Can you remind our listeners, Joe, one last time about how they can get keep up to date with what you're up to? Is there like a website or what's your handle on Twitter again and stuff like that? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything I do is through Twitter because, like I said, I just discovered it yesterday, basically, and I'm trying to build a following up there. So at Calactite, at CALACTYTE. Follow me there for updates on this and anything else that iBallistic Studio is doing. And then, of course, you can always check out our website, but that www.iballistic.com. You're not going to see too much updated stuff because because of NDAs and stuff like that, we can't really talk about a project until it's basically released. So I can assure you that the 3 games that you'll see represented on there are just a small slice of what we're actually working on right now.
Good stuff. Look, I've had a really good chat, Joe. I think it's been a great fun, and look, you can tell how much passion you got for this project. About Mortal Kombat. I really, because I would buy it. I think I agree with you what you said
Thank
earlier.
you.
There's more than I think a millions, even that.
Oh yeah.
Come on, look at Resident Evil 2 remake. Look at that.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's a great remaster, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it. And there's a massive following for Mortal Kombat, and I think there's a lot of people like me that just want to play the originals, but
Yeah.
the best version possible. So if Warner Brother are listening, you've got at least one more customer here.
I love it.
No,
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time, and I've got one final question.
Sure.
Just a bit of a silly question, but if you could share a few drinks with any Mortal Kombat character, who would you choose and why?
Yeah, oh man, that's a good one. I would say, I don't know. I'm gonna say this is off the top of my head because it's not something I really think about, but I'm gonna say Sub-Zero because I feel like that guy has, on his off time, he's probably like keeping him cold for you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, he's like, here, man, like, I feel like he'd be fun to talk to, and where'd you get your ice powers from? How'd this whole thing go down? Maybe you could teach me a thing or two. So I think he'd be a great guy to shoot the shit with.
Yeah. I mean, we like Baraka, but I don't think he'd be the best conversation.
No, I don't know if I don't even know if he can speak English. I mean, I guess he does in some of the things.
Yeah. Oh, Joe, what a legend! And I will put a few sort of like links and so forth in the show notes for I'll try and put your Twitter handle as well in the petition. So guys, please, if you're listening, if get involved, get this project off the ground if you can. So again, thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome.